Welcome to the Aeronautical Information Optimization Summit, delivering data that matters. Today, we're focused on one of my favorite topics, temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs, and the data associated with them. I'm Abby Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of FAA's Office of Aviation Policy and Plans. And for the past 2 years, I've been the Executive Champion for the modernization program for Notices to Airmen, or as we call them, Nodums. And last November, many of you joined us for our inaugural in-person summit in our nation's capital and home to the World Series champions, Washington Nationals, but I digress. So back to our regularly scheduled topics of TFR data. I'm happy to share with you today changes that we've made to our TFR systems, changes we've planned in the future, and most importantly, to listen to your ideas and get your feedback and answer your questions around this very specialized type of notice to airmen. The best way for us to have a completely meaningful conversation about TFRs is to invite a couple of my colleagues to join us. Let's start with today's MC, Jill Olson. Hey, Jill.
Hey, Abby, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. It's just great to be here again, the fourth of our 6 series. So as the group manager for Aeronautical Information Group in the Aeronautical Information Services, Jill deals with TFR data on a daily basis. Jill, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure, and thanks, Abby, and it's so great to be here. I can't believe it's the 4th session already. So again, like Abby said, I'm Jill Olson, and I'm the Group Manager of Aeronautical Information and Aeronautical Information Services. And my group deals with, on a daily basis, data, and most specifically TFRs, or temporary flight restrictions. That's why I've been so excited about this session since we started this summit series, because I think this is going to be a great conversation. And I'm really excited to welcome all of you who are joining us in our Zoom webinar, and for our visitors tuning in via live stream on social media. So welcome to you all.
Yeah, and speaking of that, for those of you that joined us on the Zoom meeting, please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions or share general feedback with us. And if you're watching on the live stream, use the link provided in the social media platform that you're using. For your friends and colleagues who may miss this session live, please share with them that they'll be able to view all the recording, not just of this session, but of all of our sessions on our social media platforms after the session.
That's right. So again, welcome to you all. So it's great how technology is keeping us so connected these days. But that reminds me, please be patient with us if we happen to experience any challenges with technology. And if you have any bandwidth issues, just try disconnecting your VPN if it's on and then rejoin us. So Abby, now that we got all the housekeeping done, you ready to get down to business and talk TFRs?
Yeah, absolutely, Jill. So, I got to warn you, this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. The data around TFRs is just so complicated. And so I think that it's important that we first provide a little background context. Right?
You're right. That is very true. Do you mind doing that for us? Can you explain to our audience what is a temporary flight restriction, just to make sure we get everything down pat right at the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. So in lay terms, a TFR is a type of notice to airmen, or Nodum. This particular type of Nodum tells pilots when the airspace over a given geographical area is temporary off limits. So the FAA can use a TFR for various types of events, such as wildfires or other natural disasters, sporting events, law enforcement, or national security.
And Abby, I think it's important to know and to let our audience know that TFRs are governed by the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFRs, right?
That's right. So you likely have heard of references, if you're an aerospace buff, to Part 137 or Part 141 TFRs and things like that. So these are the section of the code of federal regulations that grants the FAA the legal authority to issue a given type of temporary flight restrictions.
Right. And being that you said that grants the FAA, I know there are different organizations within the FAA who are responsible for the issuance of a given type of TFRs. So such as the ARTCs and the service centers, for example.
Yeah, exactly, Jill. So, and again, I think it's kind of why this is like such is important to break it down. So, in fact, the Air Route Traffic Control Centers, or ARTCs, issue temporary flight restrictions for disaster relief operations, ground hazards, or space launches. And then there's another organization in FAA called the Service Centers. They issue TFRs for air shows. Since some of our current systems allow us to create TFRs using free text instead of using templates, a TFR issued from one place might look slightly different than the same type of TFR issued from a different facility.
And that difference can make it very difficult for computer
Yes.
applications to process that information as a TFR.
Exactly, Jill. So it's especially crucial for the geospatial data that the TFRs contain. Obviously, it really helps to be able to look at a TFR on a map or a chart. And this is one of the major challenges we're working on. And later in this session, let's talk more about some of the things that we're doing to address this issue.
Most definitely. But right now, how about we talk about TFR durations?
Okie doke. So there's a temporal aspect of the TFRs that is crucial because it tells pilots when they can start flying in a certain area and when they can't. This is super critical for flight planning. TFRs related to sporting event NOTAMs are a great example. And if I could ask the control room to pull up the graphic, that'd be super great. Thanks, control room. One type of TFR is known as the sports NOTAM, or sometimes it's known as the stadium NOTAM. It was issued for national security purposes after the 9/11 attacks. This type of TFR is a permanent blanket TFR that covers regular or postseason Major League Baseball, National Football League, or NCAA Division I football games, as well as NASCAR Cup, IndyCar, or the Champ Series races. It applies to these sporting events taking place in a stadium or an arena with a seating capacity of 30,000 or more. And this is true even when there are no fans in attendance.
So even when we have the cardboard people that are on the baseball games right now, it still counts.
That's right. The cardboard people or the regular people, Jill, if it's about the capacity of the stadium.
Great. It's important to clear that up for everyone.
Yeah.
But so I know those aren't the only events that happen in those types of
No.
stadiums. Does this type of national security sports NOTAM also apply to other sporting events that take place in those types of stadiums?
So in this case, this particular NOTAM does not apply to any other sporting event or non-sporting event that is that it takes place in those stadiums that isn't specifically identified in the law. So, for example, it doesn't cover the NHL Winter Classic game that usually gets played in a baseball stadium or a football stadium. What you'll see on the screen, if you look at the graphic, you'll see some of the text from this NOTAM, and it's on the right. The image at the bottom left shows you some of the geographical data on stadium locations you can find on the FAA's Aeronautical Data Delivery Service website. We'll post this link in the chat where you can find this data for reference later. And so there it is, and there it is.
Right.
Yep.
And just to clarify for everybody tuning in, a separate NOTAM is not issued for individual events covered under this part of the law. So it's very crucial for pilots to be aware when one of these qualifying events is happening. Especially important since your favorite sport, baseball, and your Washington national season has started back up. And I know you're super happy about that. So, and speaking of baseball, there's another type of TFR that can apply to sporting events, correct?
Yeah, Jill, there sure is. And this specific type of TFR applies to kind of a different style sporting event, and it applies to air shows. Think of like the Blue Angels or aerobatic demonstrations or parachute demo teams. This type of TFR stems from the section 91.145 of the Code of Federal Regulations. It's a separate TFR that's issued for each air show or sporting event, and they don't apply to sporting events that are already covered by the blanket sports NOTAM that I mentioned a bit ago.
Okay. And clearly certified pilots know about these TFRs, but also so do commercial carriers, flight planners, dispatchers, air traffic controllers, and software developers who consume this TFR data.
Yeah, and Jill, it's, I think, a really important point to emphasize here that for new entrants to the aerospace industry, such as drone operators, y'all need to be aware that TFRs in the area before you fly, because you're responsible for them too.
Great. And it's a good point to bring out that next week's session is going to be all about these types of operators. So we're excited about that too. So last week in our session, if you recall, we talked about the ways in which our audience can access TFRs. This is just a little teaser to this week's session. So there are options for human interface and machine-to-machine interfaces, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So let's talk about the human interface first. Nodum search is the FAA's the single human interface for Nodums. And we'll have the control room put that URL into the chat box for you. We also have a website that we graphically display Nodums on a map. And for that, and you want to go to tfr.faa.gov, and that's going to go in the chat too. And that's a special website just for the TFR Nodums. And for you super data gurus out there, our machine-to-machine connection provides TFRs via the Nodum Distribution Service, or NDS. This machine interface is available to the public via FAA's, ready for this acronym, SCDS, or the System-Wide Information Management Cloud Distribution Service. We'll put that in the chat as well, because I know it'd be way too much for you in the audience for note taking.
Right, and I got to say, we in the FAA definitely do love our acronyms. So last week's session, we also did a great demo on subscribing to the SCDS. It is a hard one to say. That will be beneficial to all. So it's a relatively simple way to subscribe to the Nodum and to the TFR field. So with that, Abby, how about we just dive right into what we've been hearing about from our stakeholders about the challenges with TFR, geospatial, and temporal data?
Well, it was quite a wish list. I think Santa Claus got a smaller list on wishes. So many of the concerns were really captured in a 2016 report by the Radio Technical Commission for Aeronautics, or RTCA. These concerns revolve around things like the charting of TFRs, TFR origination, transmission to industry, graphic and their availability in electronic presentation, the textual format of the TFRs, educating the public about TFRs, and then so on and so on and so on. We've had our challenges, but I am so proud of the progress we've been making, and I'm excited for the future of how we depict TFR data.
So am I, and thank you so much, Abby, for providing all that background. I think that's brought our audience into the right frame of mind. So as we've been chatting, I've been watching the Q&A and feedback. So before we get to that, how about we invite Brian Murphy, one of our super smart people on TFRs, to join us. So Brian hey Brian, how you doing?
Hey guys, great to see you both.
Great to see you too. So Brian is the FAA Data Systems Team Manager within Aeronautical Information Services. So Brian, do you mind sharing a bit about yourself?
Sure, Jill. And again, great to see you both, and great to be here to share with our stakeholders. So yeah, like you said, I'm the Data Systems Team Manager in Aeronautical Information Services, where our team works on aeronautical information management, data governance, and ensuring that we can deliver aeronautical information out to our stakeholders.
So glad to have you here, Brian. So how about we get to some questions? So my first question is going to be for you, Brian. So this question comes from Matt in our audience. He says, I want to know, how am I supposed to know when the blanket sports TFR, the national security one, is in effect for a game? Does the FAA have schedule information from the sports leagues? And what happens when an event goes into overtime or extra innings?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Matt. It's a really good one. So right now, the FAA does not currently have a mechanism for providing all of the scheduled data for that. As always, pre-flight regulations require that prior to departure, pilots must become familiar with all available information concerning that flight, including NOTAMs. We'll continue to improve our data and our data dissemination mechanisms to make it easy as we can for you to get all the aeronautical information you need to operate safely.
Great, thank you, Brian, appreciate that. And Abby, we were just kind of talking about this. So we have another question here from our audience. Does SCDS include stadium TFRs?
Well, the answer is absolutely it does. So it encompasses all stadium TFRs. It's a great question.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. So thank you both for your answers there. And also thank you to our audience. We really appreciate you providing us some questions. And keep in mind, if we don't get to all of your questions today, we're going to make sure that we repost them online after the series is done. So I think.
Oh, and so Jill, I really want to make sure that we get people to join us for our final session on September 3rd, when we'll try to answer some additional questions from all the sessions, because I know that Q&A box just blows up, and so it's probably a challenging job for you to curate.
Yeah, it is. So thank you. Okay, so let's move on to graphical TFRs. So Brian, can you talk about what the agency is doing to improve those?
Yes, happy to, Jill. So to start, you can access graphical TFRs on the FAA website at tfr.faa.gov, as Abby had mentioned earlier. We're improving how TFRs are displayed over visual flight rules, or VFR, sectional charts. Previously, some of the VFR sectionals weren't rendering very well. I know this made it difficult for you out there to read the symbology in relation to the TFR and its boundaries. Now, you'll be able to select the VFR sectional you want to see and overlay TFRs on top of it. We're also replacing the infamous disclaimer as shown in this current visual. The current disclaimer that's posted at the bottom of the Graphical TFR website is on the left side of the screen. It basically says that you should not use the information on the website for flight planning purposes, which obviously isn't very helpful to pilots and others. An upcoming enhancement will revise the disclaimer to match what's on the current Nodum search website. Now, this new disclaimer is shown on the right. To paraphrase, the new disclaimer says that the website is designed to assist pilots and air crews in flight planning, but is not meant to provide all the pre-flight information pilots and air crews are legally required to review.
Brian, those are huge improvements. And I know that the new VFR sectionals are available now.
Yes, the software release for the new VFR sectionals happened 2 weeks ago. And we're actually going to be deploying the new disclaimer tomorrow night, early Saturday morning.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. Perfect timing for this session, really. So Brian, during last week's session, I know you weren't on the panel, but we had some questions about improving how we chart certain TFRs. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah, we did. So I'm glad to have a little bit more time today to really talk about this, because we've really improved the charting of the more permanent TFRs, like the Disney TFR is a good example of this one. This is a long-standing temporary flight restriction issued for national security purposes after 9/11.
Yeah, Brian, you also need to take credit for the improvement of the TFRs for sporting events. And by providing the sporting event locations and working with the sports organizations to provide the best available information. Good job.
Yeah, this is the team effort, and they really killed it with this.
Yeah.
So all of the stadium locations are now on the visual charts, both the sectionals and the terminal area charts, as well as radar video maps for our air traffic controllers. As an example, every year for the Super Bowl, a TFR is issued around that stadium. And this TFR applies to all users of the airspace, including our drone operators.
Brian, thanks for clarifying that it does include drone operators. But aren't there some TFRs that just apply exclusively to drones?
Yeah, good point, Jill. Those are security type TFRs. And the only difference in the format for these are that it specifies that these are drone only.
And so I got to put a plug in here for next week's session on the UAS community collaboration. You and the audience are going to hear so much more about drone specific aeronautical information during that session. So please tune in.
Yeah, in that session, we are going to have Kevin, the drone guy, just love saying that, among many others who are experts in that field. So Brian, let's talk about something. It's not such a great thing, but it's real life now. So can you talk to us about natural disaster TFRs? What improvements are we doing on that front?
Yeah, so as of about 2 weeks ago, we here at the FAA can now create graphical depictions and plain language text of TFRs for natural disaster activity in Hawaii. We did this by enhancing the TFR builder system that we use for issuing certain types of TFRs. We now have a standard template for issuing this type of TFR over the Hawaiian airspace. This is especially important for any of you helicopter pilots out there who operate in this area, and for photographers who use drone for their aerial photography.
So the system produces these digital TFRs in an industry standard format. That is so terrific.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty awesome. These digital TFRs will be visible on the Nodum search and that website again, tfr.faa.gov. We still have a lot of work to do to get these TFRs into your hands in the digital format with full AIXM dataset.
And I know, I think Abby mentioned in last week's Summit series that this is going to require some upgrades to the architecture of the Nodum system, including database enhancements and more modern data dissemination mechanisms, right?
Well, yes, Jill, because we did hear loud and clear at that first November Summit the need for this consistent TFR data, loud and clear.
It was loud and very clear, Abby. This is why these summits are so important. We learn as much from the community as we can share back. I think it's a great start, but as I said, there's still a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah, there is. So I'm going to continue to watch for questions and feedback. So how about we pause for just a minute here and address a few of them. So Abby, I have a question for you. So we have a question from Ken in our audience today who wants to know, what is the difference between the special use airspace SUA website and the TFR website?
Okay, so I'm going to refer to my notes on this one because I just want to make sure that we've got it really square. So the SUA or special use airspace website was originally developed for the textual and graphical display of all dynamic schedules for special use airspace related airspaces. The SUA system began ingesting TFRs a number of years ago for the purpose of alerting our scheduling units when their SUA schedule was in conflict with the TFR. At some point, it was decided to add the TFRs to what is displayed in the SUA website. Now, the SUA provides a 24-hour look ahead for scheduled SUAs. However, it displays all current TFRs 24 hours ahead and beyond.
Great, and thank you for clarifying that. And you know, this is a lot of information, so none of this is expected to be memorized. So good, thank you for going to your notes to make sure we were very clear.
Yeah.
So Brian, I've seen a lot of questions coming in around TFR data. So let's get to some of those. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, first question I got here. Are digital TFRs available now?
Yes. They
Great.
are available now.
That's great.
They're available now on that same website again, the tfr.faa.gov. There, you can get them in XML, AIXM, and GIS shapefiles. So look for a little orange AIXM5 label in the upper left-hand corner of a specific TFR on tfr.faa.gov. And as a reminder, not all TFRs are digital. So that's something we are working for the long term.
Right, and that's, I have to say probably the most important thing we're learning here is tfr.faa.gov. So let me see if I got any more questions on there. Okay, here's another one, Brian. So what is the FAA doing to make TFRs available in ACM format? And I'll let you explain ACM.
Sure, just so ACM or AIXM is Aeronautical Information Exchange Model. So real quick, some of the TFRs are in ACM now and on that tfr.faa.gov site. We still have some work to do on the back end to produce all TFRs in digital AIXM. And that's using an enterprise airspace tool to upgrade. And we'll also have upgrades to our databases and transmission mechanisms to share them all with the public.
Great, thank you. Let me see if we got any more questions coming through. Let's see another one here. Abby, for you, is there a machine interface or API where I can get digital TFRs?
So yes, Jill, digital TFRs are available right now at tfr.faa.gov. This is sounding like a infomercial. And again, they're in the ACM, the XML, and shapefiles. They're also available on Nodum Search, which is the human interface, as well as via the Swim Cloud Distribution Service, the SCDS, and that's the machine interface. So, but they're not in full digital format yet. At this time, the tfr.faa.gov website does not offer an API for machine-to-machine transmission of digital TFRs. Long-term, that will be provided by the Aeronautical Common Service through System-Wide Information Management, or SWIM. In the near term, we're investigating what we can do to add this to the legacy TFR system.
Great, thank you. And to the audience, please keep those questions and feedback coming. We'll respond to some more later on in the session. So let's take another turn here. Let's talk about some other types of airspace restrictions, such as altitude reservations, or LTRAVs, as they're more commonly known. Abby, can you give us some background on that, please?
Sure. First, we need to start with why. As you likely know, there are standard criteria for air traffic control separation. An altitude reservation provides a higher level of safety when a group of aircraft fly with reduced separation that we call non-standard for air traffic control. This is particularly true when groups of military aircraft are in transit together. It's also used when multiple aircraft must operate within prescribed altitudes, times, and/or areas.
So since you did such a great job explaining LTRAVs, can you try to do the same thing for us for CARFs, which is Central Altitude Reservation Function?
Yeah, so the Central Altitude Reservation Function, or CARF, is this function at our Air Traffic Control System Command Center. The CARF coordinates military and civilian altitude reservations, LTRAVs, for operations within the National Airspace System. CARF issues these LTRAVs as notices to airmen, or NOTAMs, and disseminates them to the public via the Nodum system. All of this is really relevant because altitude reservations restrict flight operations in certain geographical areas.
So Brian, I know that you prepared a visual that you'd like to share on this because it's always so much easier for people to see the difference here. So Brian, do you want to talk through that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So what you're seeing is an altitude reservation NOTAM issued around the Palmdale Regional Airport in California. On the left side is a map display of the NOTAM as depicted on NOTAM search. The inset box on the right shows the full text of the NOTAM itself. These types of NOTAMs include the geographical coordinates, which define the area in which the restriction applies. In the red box, you can see how the coordinate data are formatted.
Hey, Brian, would you share with the audience the improvements that are coming up?
Yeah, I'm really happy to share this. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So our goal is to improve how this data are formatted, especially the geospatial data in the NOTAM. Now we're implementing a template that provides coordinates in degrees, minutes, second, rather than just degrees, minutes. This will keep the data consistent and increase the precision of this data.
Yeah, and for the pilots out there, the visualization of these NOTAM types is going to make it much easier to parse software to process that data.
And I understand the timing for this is going to be kind of the winter.
Yep, you got it, Abby. That's right. December, January timeframe.
Awesome.
Thanks, Brian. So Abby, you're our expert, our resident expert here on process improvement. So do you mind describing a few processes that are being improved to go along with these system changes?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to, Jill. So, you know, over time, all the subtle formatting differences have crept into the temporary flight restrictions, making it really difficult for software programs to ingest, parse, and visualize the data. And as you know, training is one of the 4 strategic pillars of the Nodum modernization system, and something near and dear to my heart because as of last week, I was the director of technical training. So to maximize these improvements, we're developing new training for issuing TFRs, along with job aids and templates to help our internal workforce get consistent.
That's great. And that training is also going to be planned for the air route traffic control centers, the service centers, the command centers, all those people that we talked about earlier who issue TFRs for the FAA.
Yep. You're right, Jill. So for instance, we are working with the ARTSIs to develop training and update the standard operating procedures. And what we're talking about here specifically is we're working with the ARTSI flight data units on their standard operating procedures and their training requirements to make sure that they are sufficiently resourced. When we're also working with the FAA's service centers who issue air show and sporting event TFRs as well.
You know, I just want to take this moment to really thank the both of you and to the larger FAA for all the work that is being done to produce more consistent TFR data with better display capabilities. It's just amazing. So how about we talk about the future and what the future looks like? So last week we heard all about the Aeronautical Common Service, right? ACS, which is going to be the future of aeronautical information. But maybe not everybody in the audience was able to join us last time. So Brian, do you mind giving us a quick overview of what the ACS is?
Yes, I'd be happy to, as always. So currently there are several types of aeronautical information provided by the FAA authoritative sources. Now, the Aeronautical Common Service, or the ACS, is a new system that will collect and integrate aeronautical information from 5 of these authoritative sources. Now, the ACS integrates aeronautical information and provides it in a common data format for anyone who has subscribed to the ACS. Now, it's important to note that while it does not provide the human interface, ACS does enable machine-to-machine interface to make this collection of aeronautical information available to other systems.
That's cool, Brian. So, hey, Jill, since you're the aeronautical data lady, would you please describe the 2 main categories of data that are available to the ACS?
Oh, Abby, I'd love to, because these are, 2 things. These are things that are near and dear to my heart with my day-to-day job, right? So we'll just go through this, and there's two main categories of data. Okay, there's static and dynamic. So static data consists of three sources. We've got NASAR, excuse me, another acronym for you. That's the National Airspace System Resource. So what that does, it provides airports, navigational aids, services, and other supporting aeronautical information. Then we have ENASAR, right? So this is the Electronic National Airspace System Resource. This provides static definitions of special activity airspaces, SAA. So these are airspaces where limitations may be posed upon aircraft operations, such as military operating areas or restricted areas. Finally, we've got OAS, the Obstacle Authoritative Source. This provides data on obstacles in the National Airspace System. Then we've got dynamic data. So that's two different sources for that. So we have the Federal Nodum System, FNS, which provides NODUMs, including TFRs. And we have the Special Use Airspace Management System, which provides schedules for special activity airspace. Hope that helped clear that up a little bit.
It did.
So again, like I said, someone who works with aeronautical information on a daily basis, this is such an exciting development. And I'm sure our audience is wondering, okay, that's great information, but how is this going to improve TFRs? So Brian, back to you to help answer that question.
Yeah. So the ACS will provide all these data sources via that single machine interface that folks can subscribe to. This means that TFRs will be available via ACS along with all of these other types of aeronautical information that Jill just mentioned. It's a one-stop shop using modern web services. When it first comes online though, the ACS will provide the same TFR data that people get now via Nodum search and the Nodum distribution service. That is, the TFRs available via ACS when it first comes online will not be that digital TFR in AIXM format. As I mentioned earlier, we are working to improve the Nodum system so that it can support the dissemination of digital TFRs to the public.
So that's great. So Brian, can you tell us then what the phases of the release of these improvements are?
Yeah, let me show you, Abby.
Okay.
You know, I love my slides.
You are the slide guy.
So the easiest way to make sure you have the latest aeronautical information is to subscribe to updates from the ACS data subscription service. Here you can create subscriptions for the feature types you care about, such as NOTAMs. The ACS will provide each subscriber with an endpoint address for them to get AI updates. The other important feature is the web feature service. This allows stakeholders to query for AI with open-ended, user-defined filters. For example, you could query AI on unique identifiers, airports by designators, or NOTAMs by location and time. Due to the open-ended nature of the web feature service, you should use the ACS consumer testbed to develop and test different queries and ensure that they, one, meet your needs, and two, are processed efficiently. You can begin the ACS testbed onboarding process by contacting us at acsconsumer@faa.gov. And like all the links, we're going to put that email address in the chat. As more and more digital TFRs are produced, some of the other ACS capabilities listed on the right will come into play.
And so, I gotta just put it out there. For those of you in the audience who want more details on the Aeronautical Common Services, or ACS, I highly recommend you watch last week's session on Nodum data and the Aeronautical Common Services. It's available on FAA's YouTube channel and all of our other social media platforms.
Great. Thanks for reminding everybody of that, Abby. So looking at the time, it looks like we have a little bit a buffer here to talk about one more item. So before we wrap up with answering some more audience questions. So Brian, you mentioned that expanding the production of TFRs is in the works, but can you tell us some more about that?
Yeah, sure, Jill. As you can see in the visual,
Another slide.
Another slide. The Aeronautical Common Service will be deployed in July 2021. This is part of a broader package of aeronautical information system enhancements. The FAA is developing an enterprise airspace tool. Now, this is pretty cool. This will be able to produce things like digital TFRs using data models like AIXM. The creation of digital TFRs is an important feature of this enterprise airspace tool. While we're still a few years away from implementing that tool, we are doing what we can in the meantime to make critical infrastructure improvements and incremental enhancements to the TFR system that will benefit our stakeholders.
Great, Brian, thank you. You know, the future is looking really great. So, and plus we're doing so much right now just to make everything better, like you said, for our stakeholders. I just want to thank everybody who've taken the time to share with us your feedback. You certainly have submitted a lot of questions, and it's greatly appreciated. So I'm going to do my best to go through as many as I can so we can get some responses for you. Okay, so my first question is for Abby. So we have an important question that came in from social media this afternoon, even before this has begun. So the question is, as a Part 107 licensed remote pilot, I am held to the standards of checking TFRs, etc. Are hobbyists held to checking TFRs?
And yes, absolutely they are. So if you are a remote pilot, you're still held to the same accountability to check all TFRs before you fly.
Great, I'm glad we cleared that up there. So Brian, a question for you came in from Alex. His question, or their question is, can someone get ACS, or is it limited to certain users?
Yeah, good question, Alex. The ACS is a machine-to-machine interface available to consumers via the FAA SWIM infrastructure. That's a system-wide information management infrastructure. So if you're developing a system looking to access ACS, please contact the ACS consumer email address that I had mentioned before, acsconsumer@faa.gov. From there, we can answer detailed questions about ACS and begin the SWIM onboarding process to get access to the ACS consumer testbed.
Great, thank you, Brian. Let me see. So another question for you, Brian. So does data have to enter ACS in ACM format, or will ACS translate formats like JSON into ACM? More acronyms.
Yeah, lots of acronyms. Yeah, so
it's cool to see that the data people are on these questions. I love it. Keep them coming, everybody.
No, that is really great, Abby. Like, we are happy to get more people in using this data. So the more, the better. So to answer the question, the ACS ingests from 5 different authoritative sources. And while 4 of these sources provide ACS with ACM data, one source provides data to the ACS in custom XML format, and the ACS transforms that data into AIXM. So the end user will see it in ACM.
Great, thank you, Brian. Let me see, Abby, question for you. Will the future of ACS provide users with geospatial data?
So I'm gonna turn to my notes here to get this right, Jill. Okay. All right, so the ACS provides users with geospatial data for many aeronautical information features. Okay, so it includes airports, obstacles, and nav aids. And it won't initially, although the ACS isn't going to initially provide TFRs containing geospatial information, but that's probably a future requirement.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, Brian, will the Aeronautical Common Service, ACS, replace the federal Nodum system, Nodum Distribution Service?
Yeah, so NDS, or the Nodum Distribution Service, only provides NOTAMs, while ACS provides integrated aeronautical information. So they have different purposes.
Great to clear that up. Okay, Abby, a question for you. Can you provide a list of charts that are available in the ACS web mapping service? What is available now and what is coming up?
So that's a good question. So the Aeronautical Common Services does not provide navigation charts via the web map service. Rather, it provides map layers of aeronautical information feature imagery stored in the Aeronautical Common Services, such as runways, special activity airspace, that can be used to layer over other base map layers. Charts and maps are available via the FAA's Aeronautical Chart Users Guide, and again, we'll post that link in the chat.
Great, thank you. Brian, a question for you. Is there any plan to move the airports and nav aids to ACM format?
Yes. Actually, you can get airports and nav aids in ACM format now through the Aeronautical Information Services site. And that's you'll see that there. We actually talked a little bit about this in session 2, so go ahead and read that. But yes, through ACS, nav aids and airports will be available in ACM 5.1 format.
Cool.
Great. Thank you. So Brian, does that mean that does this mean that the NASA 28-day subscription files are going to be retired at some point?
Yeah, it's another good question. No, there's no current plans to retire those legacy files.
Great, thank you.
I know people love those.
Right. All right, Abby, a question for you. So will FAA SWIM be consistent with ICAO SWIM?
So that is a great question. And yes, that's the goal.
Okay.
The FAA chairs the ICAO, that's the International Civil Aviation Organization, for those who haven't tuned in and heard that acronym before. And that's a United Nations body that is for navigation of airspace globally. So the FAA chairs the ICAO Asia Pacific System-Wide Information, or SWIM, task force, which is developing an internationally accepted standard of SWIM implementation across the globe. We're currently developing the implementation guides to include SWIM services, architecture, registry, and the network infrastructure to meet this goal. Because the FAA has achieved a mature SWIM implementation in advance of many other parts of the world, we have taken a lead role in the ICAO implementation plan that's going forward, and I'm actively working to make sure that each ICAO member region is on board and that we implement a plan that allows international data exchange using the AIXM, the ACM, the Aeronautical Information Exchange Model. And here's a new acronym, folks, WIXM, the Weather Information Exchange Model. That's WIXM, WIXM, and other established standards. It's a great question.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see. Brian, question for you. Is there some kind of primer for Nodum and TFR keywords, contractions, and jargon to help understand what a Nodum says? Because they're probably very confusing to some.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jill. Yeah, there is. Section 513 of the Aeronautical Information Manual publishes that information. Within section 513C, you'll find a table that's table 5-1-2. It's just, this will help you get to it really quick. That's the most common used Nodum contractions. We'll post a link to that manual in the chat. The Aeronautical Information Manual also points to a PDF containing the larger set of contractions. We'll post that link as well.
Yeah, and so Brian, I think it's important to add here that because the Nodum and TFR keywords and contractions are confusing, and that if you use Nodum search as the human interface, you can choose to read your Nodums in plain language. So I just wanted to make sure that people who missed that knew that too.
Yeah, that's a good clarification, Abby. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. So Abby, earlier Brian talked about what the new disclaimer is that's coming out, and it's going to come out on Saturday. So
Yep.
can you just, and you know what, at this point, you can just read this verbatim, right? Because we want to make sure everyone gets it, but can you just read that?
I am going to look at this disclaimer and just read it verbatim.
Perfect.
Here we
Thank
go,
you.
everybody. This site is informational in nature and is designed to assist pilots and air crews for flight planning and familiarization. It may be used in conjunction with other pre-flight information sources needed to satisfy the requirements of 14 CFR, that's Code of Federal Regulations, 91.103, and is not to be considered a sole source of information to meet all pre-flight action. Due to the system processing delays, recently entered NOTAMs may not be displayed.
Thank you.
And I think that's like really helpful when you compare it with the other disclaimer, because the other disclaimer made it seem like you couldn't use the information in the site. And this really provides a lot more clarity that says, use this to augment the other things that you need to do before you fly.
Most definitely. So excited for that to come out on Saturday. So I just want to say thank you to Abby and to Brian for just having this conversation with me today, and also to the audience here. So for all of your questions and feedback. So just please be on the lookout for a follow-up where we'll summarize the questions that we didn't get to today. So Abby, how about we just do a quick little reminder what our final 2 sessions in this series are going to be all about?
Yeah, Jill, thanks. I cannot believe that we're almost done here with session 4, and there's 2 final sessions left, but I think they're going to be well worth participating in for sure. So we'll have our final, we'll have our FAA drone experts joining us next week for a session on UAS community collaboration and data, aeronautical data associated with that community. That's this next Thursday, August 27 at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then on September 3rd, we'll talk about what's ahead for aeronautical information and notices to airmen, including what we're doing related to application programming interfaces or APIs. I heard you loud and clear at that November summit that APRs are needed to simplify how you access FAA data as the authoritative source.
And for all of you out there in virtual land, if you have not registered for those remaining sessions, we certainly hope that you'll do so. So before we close and say goodbye, I thought, Brian and Abby might want to get some parting thoughts to our audience here. So Brian, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, as I said a little bit before, it's really been great to join you both and have these sessions where we can share information with our stakeholders, but really just as important is to get that feedback. We don't do this for ourselves. We do this for the flying public. We do this for taxpayers. We do it to continue to keep the national airspace safe and efficient. And hearing your feedback really helps us do that.
That is very true. Thank you, Brian. Abby, how about you? Got some final words to share?
Yeah, I do. I mean, so today we talked about a lot of complicated content, and I know that the 3 previous and the 2 upcoming, there's been a lot of work that we've been doing over the last 24 months really to improve the system. And so for Brian and Jill and I to talk to you today just alone literally took the work of hundreds of people working together across lines of business and getting feedback from the aerospace community on what improvements are needed. And so this is my thank you to the huge village of people that have really poured their hearts and heads into making this modernization effort move forward and with a great, bright future.
Thank you, Abby. And again, many thanks to both Brian and Abby for joining us today. We also want to say a special thank you to our control room, who's helping this technology part run pretty smooth, and a whole slew of subject matter experts who have helped us with this information, because it's very complex, but we've got the right group of people. So, and also a special thank you to our audience for joining us today. It's been so much fun preparing for this session, and I was just honored to be a part of this summit series. So this is my last one, so it's been a great time. So thank you all. So until we meet again, and we hope you all stay safe and healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.